Aham, I, Vibhaho of Lord Brahma. Translation. At the end of the millennium, when the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan, lay down within the water of devastation, Brahma began to enter into him along with all creative elements, and I also entered through his breathing. So please repeat, at the end of the millennium.
At the end of the millennium,
when the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan,
when the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan,
lay down within the water of devastation, Brahma began to enter into him, along with all creative elements. And I also entered through his breathing. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Narada is known as the son of Brahma, as Lord Krishna is known as the son of Vasudeva. The personality of Godhead and his liberated devotees like Narada appear in the material world by the same process. As it is said in the Bhagavad Gita, the birth and activities of the Lord are all transcendental. Therefore, according to authorized opinion, the birth of Narada as a son of Brahma is also a transcendental pastime. His appearance and disappearance are practically on the same level as that of the Lord. The Lord and his devotees are therefore simultaneously one and different as spiritual entities. They belong to the same category of transcendence. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminita Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvitesha Shunyavadi Pasadeshatine. Thank you again, Prabhus, for having me on board the Miami ship. And it's also a pleasure to meditate on this segment of Bhagavatam, which is a conversation between two great souls, Narada and Vyas. Actually, their conversation isn't really any different between Krishna and Arjuna's conversation in the more famous Bhagavad Gita as it is. But as the point is made here in this shloka, that, or especially in Prabhupada's purport, that the activity. Are we doing okay there? There's lots of noise. I'm not sure if you're hearing me. There's just lots of racket going on. We're okay? You can hear me?
Finally, I can hear you.
Finally. Should I start again?
Yeah, you're okay. Yeah, you can.
Okay. I was just trying to make the point that the activities of the Lord and his devotees are non-different because they're both enveloped in the spiritual realm. Krishna helps us to understand these things. Like in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Namam karmani limpanti, nami something. Sorry. In this verse from the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is helping us to understand that he is beyond material influences. And those who hear about his glories, his karma, his activities, his janma, his karma, divyam, because they are divine. His birth and his activities are of a divine nature. A person who's always exposed to that, they also become divine. And they fit into the category of being not necessarily beyond, beyond infallibility, because the soul is always fallible. And a liberated soul, you can say, is infallible. But Krishna is beyond that. So we can never be Krishna. That's very clear. We can never be God, but we can become godly. And so what is occurring in this verse, text 29, is that at the end of the millennium, when everything gets wrapped up into the Lord through inhalation, the devotees of the Lord, surrendered souls who are liberated, also come in with his breath, the intake of his breath. So that's interesting. Whenever I see a verse that starts out the end of the millennium, I think of the end of our recent millennium, meaning like our idea of millennium is after 1,000 years in our calendar, things will change, and a lot of times writers, they talk about the generation that was born as new millennials and how they are different from the generation prior to them. They come with their characteristics. So if you recall, at the end of our millennium, we experienced what was Y2K. And my God, was that ever a display or a show of public gullibility? We all thought everything was going to finish. It was going to come to kind of an end, that our computers would fail us, that we would have to make adjustments, we would have to invest in some new kind of gadgetry or get everything up to step. And lo and behold, when the clocks changed at midnight of 1999, nothing changed. We were all hearing that in Australia, which is kind of ahead of most of us, that people were partying like normal at New Year's, and everything was just the way it was. Now, I had the good fortune to walk the Fiji Islands, and on one of the islands, I forget the name, it starts with a T, they have what's called the 180th meridian, and it's called the International Dateline. That's where the day begins. And I walked there, oh God, I think it was 12 years ago. And devotees were telling me that a lot of tourists were there from abroad, especially Australia, and places that were a little closer, New Zealand, Australia. And they had their drinks out. And when the day actually started, the lights turned on, of course, and whatever electrical needs were there, they were just operating as normal. And people were kind of happy that we didn't, and maybe the joke was on everybody that why were we so concerned? Why were we, in some cases, people were panicking because of the mass brainwash that went on at the time, and the kind of brainwash that continues to occur from time to time. And so we can see people are gullible. They have submitted to the material energy and everything that represents mundaneness. So we are very lucky, that is, those who sit down for the Bhagavatam every morning, because we are touching a different reality. And it is a reality that is constant. It doesn't change. I say that because the physical energy that we live in is constantly in a flux. It's constantly adjusting itself. And so you can't trust it, but you can trust that which is permanent. And so when we hear from great saints like Narada and Vyas, who have a status that's not ordinary, but quite extraordinary, we can actually feel some special blessing because we can trust them, because they're not, let's say, they don't cater to the senses. Rather, they have control of the senses. So that's one statement that Chanakya Pandit makes. I know he's not popular with everybody. Actually, Prabhupada never called him necessarily didn't give him the status of being a great Vaishnava. He was just a moralist of sorts. And he came up with amazing sayings. And one of them is that you just can't trust people who can't control their senses. So we should always keep that in mind. And we have a practice called sadhana, where you learn to control the mind. Like many of us are up early in the morning, 4 o'clock, we take a shower, and some of us were in the household duties. It might be a little later, it's totally understandable. But nevertheless, our lives are regulated and they're disciplined, and it gives us a sense of firmness and perhaps even honesty. We're living with the truth. We're not listening to our senses. So we get up early in the morning and we may not take breakfast till 4 hours later, you know? And so in this way we learn, active control of the senses. And in this way we find ourselves in the spiritual energy. So just referring to Bhagavad Gita, where in the 9th chapter, Krishna says, Mahatmanastumam Parata, Daiving Prakritim Ashrita. So a Mahatma, or saintly person, is one who's surrendered to the spiritual energy of the Lord. And that devotee is also characterized by always chanting Krishna's glories and having tremendous dhridabrata, that is determination in the practice of devotional service. I think we all know what it means to be waxing and waning in devotional service, when we're up and down and sliding and slipping all over the place. But when we show a measure of steadiness, then this indicates something good and something very saintly. But one important point to take note of is that while we are steady with our sadhana and the control of our senses, we must also show a devotional heart. What I'm getting at is that we sometimes see Kanishta devotees who are very good about following the rules and regulations. And yet sometimes they don't show the heart of bhakti, they don't carry the spirit so well. They're kind of harsh on people, they're kind of cold and crass. I think you know what I'm talking about. We meet those kind of people, and the softness that is generally to be demonstrated, or sensitivities don't always surface for those who just take up rules and regulations for the sake of taking them up. That term is given there, niyamagraha, and the nectar of instruction, upadeshamrita. That when you follow rules for the sake of following them and not understanding the intent behind them. So, I'm working on this book, and I'm interviewing some of our veteran devotees here in Canada. And one devotee was telling me over the phone, she's way over on the West Coast, about how she was doing Vijari work. She was working on Radharani's feet, massaging them, and her feet, which are generally hard because the marble, suddenly became soft. So she felt that this was a mystical experience, and that she was actually developing her sensitivities in devotional service. So I'm not going to dispute that. I'm not going to question it. I know her very well. I first met her and her boyfriend and his boyfriend and his girlfriend, two couples on the street. And I knew them from when they were babies, devotionally speaking. And I think that her devotional approach was quite genuine. And what she had to say, I'm not going to question. But the point is that we definitely want to have a change. And when a millennium changes, when there's a time change, a lot of people get a sense that, oh, I should be doing something a little different. I should be improving in my behavior and my actions. Just like people at New Year's time, they make New Year's resolutions. I'm going to cut down on eating, or I'm going to drink less, or whatever it is. And devotees may do those kind of things too, at Janmashtami or some holy days that we hold dear to our heart. We may make some vows to the deity or to Guru, or announce it to the devotees. In this way, they give blessings. So that is this is one of the points. I find it very intriguing that looking at this verse, we're talking about the change, the transformation. Narada Muni, as we know, was a young boy, and he was an orphan. And sometimes orphans can get very spiritual. They can get very connected with the absolute. So Narada Muni was one of them. And what sparked his interest in devotional life was, while his mother was alive, some great sadhus came to their home and they spent a few days. So Narada, as a young boy, had a chance to do service and rendered service to these high elevated souls referred to as Bhagavatas. And he also had a chance to hear from them. He had a chance to hear some divine messages. So he felt himself blessed. And when his mother died from a snake bite, he said, what am I going to do now? And then he figured, I think I'll just go for a long walk now. This does, let's say, trigger there are interesting things that trigger long walks. Like, say, for instance, Vamande's walk was quite short in terms of period of time given, but his walk was long in the fact that he took long strides, long stretches. It only took 3 for him to cover the cosmos. And then we hear about Vidura, the blessed younger brother of Dhritarashtra. And he was insulted by his nephew, Duryodhana. And he figured, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm not going to take these insults. I don't need to be here. And the palace always reeks with politics. Most big buildings do. Most big buildings are the cause of dissension and the cause of lots of trouble, just like diamonds are and precious stones. They seem to be they seem to ignite trouble ahead, or trouble in River City. That's a musical. I don't know if you remember that one. Narada Muni, you can say, comes close to Krishna. And after his experience of seeing the Lord, having traveled a lot, he now became very purified. And now the time was up, the millennium is over. There's a new chapter in the history of the world. He took on a new spiritual body. And we hear sometimes of those instances occurring. Even Brahma took on a new body after he had some wicked thoughts and like below the belt kind of consciousness. He actually, wanted a change, and he was blessed with a change of body because the gross current body that he had was leading him into a dark tunnel. So therefore he he made changes. So we like to hear stories about transformation. I think most people do. I think everybody likes to hear a happy story. There are tragedies in the world. Shakespeare was very good at presenting some tragedies. Romeo and Juliet also comes to mind as one of those stories which has a kind of a sad ending. And we hear about some stories. Karna, he had left with a sad ending. There was a case of somebody with more or less an orphan. He didn't know his parents, but he was adopted in many ways. When he was talking to his mother, his actual biological mother, Kunti, just before the war began at Kurukshetra, he had determined and expressed to her that my real parents are the ones that raised me, Atirat and Radha. They're the ones that raised me. They're the ones that took care of me and that looked after me, not the people that ignored me and left me. No. So he's kind of rubbing it in with his biological mother. And of course, we know all those kind of interesting circumstances that took place. A few interesting points is that the Lord likes to lie down in the water, the causal water. In this case, it's called the water of devastation, which indicates an end, and then after a new beginning. I mean, the world does go bad. It'd be interesting to see what happens at the end of Kali Yuga. When it goes really bad, the big cosmic toilet will have to be flushed at some point in time, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of interesting things that go down with those waters. On the happy side, Lord Shiva is known to do a very exhilarating dance, playing his damaru and so on like that. And when there is a devastation, just to put another little extra happy note onto the occasion, which is subsequent to the negative, the negative, let's say, negative event was the Lord, that is Krishna, finds himself as a baby, sucking his big toe on a big leaf, and he's floating on down into endless existence, you know. So the God appears at the end, the source of all. Krishna is the Karuna Karunam, Sarva Karuna Karunam, the cause of all causes, you know, makes his appearance at the end of the world. Krishna personally, not necessarily as well as Vishnu. So they're working hand in hand, you can say. Narayana means one who is the aggregate total of the resting place of all living beings, you know. And Ayana also has to do with water. So I think most of us like to lie down in water. It's very relaxing. We have this one lake in Canada, and it's called Lake Manitou, Little Manitou. And it's right in the middle of the country in Saskatchewan. So what happens there is that you go to this lake, it has that buoyancy dynamics like the Dead Sea. And so when you go in that lake, you just lie down and you don't sink. It's totally magical. It's got all kinds of healing properties. And so it's got all these minerals in it that allow you to float to no end. I found it hard to believe before I got there. But somebody nearby was telling me, oh, you should go to that lake. You'll go there and you could just lie on your back and read the newspaper while lying down. Of course, I don't read the newspaper, and but I got the point. And so lying on water beds, and it's just very relaxing. We are mainly made of water, our bodies are, and so water is not alien to us. Like there in Miami, you're close to the water, and when people want to relax, they like to go right to the edge, to the beach, not just to submerge, but just being near the water is oftentimes good enough. It's even an Ayurvedic cure. One approach to Ayurvedic cure, if you have some mental imbalance, is that if you go and spend some time near the water and listen to its movement and be near its oxidation, it actually does serve to help. And a lot of people in general, they feel quite good about being in water, and swimming is also one of the very best things that you can do. So I'm like one of those persons. I love the water, and I feel very great, so refreshed when I come out of the water. And I'm sure most of you feel the same thing. The closest we get to, however, is a shower. You turn the knob and the water gushes forth. And usually we have a good time in the shower. I know a lot of people, they love to sing in the shower. Or sometimes you might like to, recite a verse from the Bhagavad Gita during the course of taking a shower. And there's nothing wrong with that. So we are meant to be close to water. Of course, we're supposed to be on the land as well. But we have these special connections with the Lord. And as the Lord is very remote from us, he's also very dear to us. But being that we generally accept that God is remote, unless if you can really feel the pulsations of super soul in the heart, most of us feel that Krishna is distant. So how do we get over that feeling of God being at an incredible length away? Well, the answer is get close to the Lord through his devotee, because the devotee is an exemplar of bhakti, one who carries the qualities of devotion. And so you can actually feel a presence of God in the presence of a great devotee. A devotee is somebody who is devotional, someone who devotes time to the Spirit. And whereas a non-devotee is somebody who hasn't quite figured it out just yet, is still caught up in physical pursuits and endless longings, sunk in a rajagun mode of passion, which oftentimes is the stumbling block, like kama isha, krodha isha, rajagam samudbhava. It is lust that is considered sometimes to be the enemy. In fact, it's the all-devouring enemy that checks us from making spiritual advancement. And lust does come in different shapes and forms. It's not always just the good old-fashioned romantic thing. But when we talk about just lust, it really means that it can come in the form of just aspiring to be mystical, aspiring to get lots of attention, aspiring to have a big position and to get lots of followers and so on like that. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was actually expressing Nadanam Najanam Sundari Kavitang Vajagadishikamaya. So that in his Shikshastakam, his famous prayers, 8 stanzas, he expresses that the mood of surrender is that I don't really need to accrue, I don't really need to accumulate lots of followers, and it's also not necessary for me to have lots of riches, nor to have a very sort of abundant sex life. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was saying that he doesn't need those things at all, but that he was just happy engaged in service. So that is what we can learn from any of the episodes in the Bhagavatam. It's about service and highlighting the glories of Krishna, which is what Vyasadeva in particular was not doing in the beginning, although he had compiled the Vedas and contributed much to the betterment of human society. He felt not fulfilled And so it was his guru, Narada Muni, who helped him with this. And they said, really what's been missing here is that there's not been sufficient glorification of Krishna. So that's kind of where we want to go with our studies in devotional service in the Bhagavatam. And it's also what we want to reap as far as, executing regulative principles. We want our hearts to be softened so that we can gain something great, something that we don't have at the moment. And we are divested of those finer sentiments, and we need to work on them. It does take time, but we do have time on our side. Time is always on our side. And like we discussed last week, Krishna is time. So we can reflect on Krishna's time a little bit more. Like if you have problems in general, don't you find that if you honor time, give time to having complications sort themselves out, that it does work itself out. Time is a great healer of pain and grief. So let time do its work, its magical work. And again, Krishna is time. And then, we will get to a spot where we're comfortable, where we want to be. Mind you, we follow in the footsteps of the 6 Goswamis. And the Goswamis express in their philosophy that I'm never going to be satisfied with my level of devotion. I'm always going to be reaching out. I'm always going to be, trying to touch Krishna's lotus feet. I'm going to stretch myself. A great Vaishnava in our lineage will never say, I have found Krishna or Krishna's found me. I'm a pure devotee. I don't need to, make any more steps towards self-improvement. I'm it. I've done it, and that's it. So once you have that kind of an attitude, it's actually very complacent, and it's a dangerous spot to be in. So we don't want to be there. We want to honor and praise Narada Muni for his eloquence of speech, his eloquent way of handling people, his eloquent way of departure from this world. And his rigid, even though while he moves around, he does always come back, and he's like an amazing Sankirtan devotee. He meets, like we see, he sort of shows up here and there, and he's called the transcendental astronaut. He's, somebody who comes around and makes a point, a spiritual point, and delivers a message of transcendence. And he doesn't have much time because he's cursed to not stay in one place for a long time. So he has to be very clean, concise, to the point. Here it is. It's about surrender to Krishna and go for it. I'm leaving now, but I'll be back. So in one sense, I guess you could say Narada Muni is the Terminator. He's a Terminator in the sense that he's come here to terminate our lives, to change our lives. So if it's not Narada Muni, it's one of the other 11 great Mahajans. And there's also a long list apart from that of great souls that are extremely enlightened. Yes. So, the Bhagavatam tells us of 12 great souls who are expert in the science of devotional service. And I think we can name them. Why don't we? So there's Brahma, there's Shiva, Shambhu, Prahlad, Janak, the father of Sita, Bhishma, Prahlad, son of Hiranyakashipu. Prahlad was, Swayambhu, Manu is in that list, Yamaraj as well, So we have 12 great personalities that we should listen to and take inspiration from. Unfortunately, the popular mundaners of this world, many of our leaders in the political field, cannot offer what human society really needs. And that is kind of a sad story. But that is the story. That is the reality of today. So I would like to thank you for listening to me. I know that you've got the situation where you finish at 8:15, and so I started on time, and now we'll try to finish on time. We made some points, so we're just asking if any of you could, let's say, reiterate something that was said in the purport or the verse, or anything that I may have conjured up, anything nonsense that I brought up. Hare Krishna. It's nice to see you, Ragni. Nice to see you. Oh, hi.
Anyway,
We got Manjaris here. Wow, our Lalita Madhava and everyone. Jai. Hare Krishna. We see a Bhakta Tim. I hope Bhakta Tim. Oh, Raphael. Raphael. I don't know if I know you, Raphael. And we have Maharaj, who we spent some time with on the phone yesterday.
Gary Phil. Who's Gary Phil?
Is there anybody who wants to say anything?
So does anyone have any questions? Maharaj, did you want to say something? That
I have a question about Brahma.
Oh God, I'm not an expert on Brahma, but you can try me out.
There was a pastime where Brahma chased his daughter. And then, one time somebody went to Prabhupada and said, because we are coming from Brahma Gauriya Sampradaya, Brahma is our head. We are from Brahma. Brahma is our leader. And then the devotee say, but Brahma, he has some problem. He was trying to chase his daughter. And then Prabhupada became so upset. And can you comment a little bit how Brahma, because some people are confused. They say how we are coming from Brahma, Gauriya Sampradaya, Brahma, and Brahma has some problem there.
Yes, and the Church of England was started by a guy who had lots of wives, and he killed a few of them because they didn't supply him with a male heir to the throne.
We hardly hear you. Some problem with the sound. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, it's okay. Oh, now you went off.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Church of England all started, the head of their sampradaya, by a person who had multiple wives, and he killed, I don't know how many of them, because they didn't provide him with an heir to the throne. And what happened to him, I don't know. I think he died from different diseases. I heard one of them was a sex disease. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on it. So he ended up that sampradaya. He was the head of the Church of England, breaking away from the papal disciplic succession, which had its headquarters in Rome. So that is their sampradaya. But any accounts I've read about Henry VIII is that he never changed. His heart never changed. Whereas in the case of Brahma, he actually did have a change of heart, and he acquired a new body. There was a physical body that didn't have was not taxed with the lust that was there in the prior existence. So we can say that things got rectified for Brahma, and therefore we are proud to say that he's heading up our sampradaya. Brahma's made some mistakes. He misjudged Krishna during that affair during Krishna was having lunch with the cowherd boys. the calves seem to have left. You know, he's made a few mistakes here and there, but he got rectified. In the case of the Church of England, Henry VIII, I am, whatever. And he never really got purified. Although I heard that in the beginning, when he was a young man, he actually wanted to enter the priesthood. He wanted to actually be a holy man. But I guess he stepped into, some royal situation, and he got spoiled, I guess you could say. And so that does happen to people. It does happen. It goes through their heads. Like we see, we've had our own experience in our movement with some of our illustrious leaders who just had too much attention, and it kind of went to their head. Of course, that major problem is behind us, but we can see that there is sometimes contamination. But we also have to remember that there must be wiggle room for rectification. Apichi sudaracharo bhajati mam ananyabhag. So even if you commit some great abomination, if you get yourself in a different spot, rightly situated, that means if you have regret and remorse, then Krishna will give you another chance. And that's what happened with Brahma.
Thank you, Maharaj. It was a great explanation. Thank you very much. You know,
And by the way, I just want to clarify, I'm not saying that people of the Anglican Church, I'm not saying it's a bad tradition. I think it's a good culture. There's some really wonderful people in that culture, in that tradition. And they're quite pure. It's just that I was just talking about the head, that
Yes.
he wasn't squeaky clean in his heart.
Anybody else has any questions?
Hare Krishna, here's Sarangadas.
Very well, sir.
I just want to make a comment. It's not really a question. Thank you, Maharaj, for your wonderful class. It was very nice to see you also.
You were very nice.
Yes, for Brahma, I think it's an example. It's Lila purposes. He is a son of Krishna. He's very elevated, and showing us that even the most elevated person can have some issue. Then what about us? Very fallen soul. We have to be very, very careful.
Exactly. Lalita Madhava, I hope that you'll never, ever slip into that kind of error, like along some of the examples that were given. So may you be stay pure. And I
Thank
see.
you.
Thank
you
are
for
you
your
in Miami, by the way, or do you live in Miami?
We live in Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale.
Maharaj.
Oh, Fort Lauderdale, yeah. I've been to
Yeah,
the
I am Sarangadas. You know me actually.
Oh, well, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, we met.
Lalita Madhava Devi Dasi.
Yes.
Okay, that's your wife.
Please accept my humble obeisances, Maharaj. And thank you for giving this nice lecture. You made my day just hearing to you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Lalita Madhava Devi Dasi and Saranga Prabhu from Fort Lauderdale. And yes, you're right, I have been there. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Haribol.
You know, lots of Canadians, they're snowbirds, right?
Yes.
A lot of people hang out in Florida in the colder months.
Yes. Yes, I think
You
because
got
of
to grab
COVID,
some of them and send them up to us.
yeah, because of COVID,
Yeah,
maybe
because of COVID.
coming, yeah.
That's true. That's true. Now, you know, if I was there now, I would go and swim in your ocean.
Yes.
I would go to, and you probably would say, oh, it's too cold.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was told before only Russians and Canadians swim at the beach in the winter in Miami, Florida. Hare Krishna, I guess that's it then.
Hare
Yes,
Krishna.
thank you. Thank you, Maharaj.
We we do want to thank you, Maharaj, for graciously accepting our invitation and enlightening us this morning. So, if no one else has any questions, we can stop here.
All right. Thank you. It's great to see you all. Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Dandavat pranam.
The Prabhupada ki jai.
Haribo, Haribo, Haribo.
Kripa sindhubhya cha tanam pavanyo vaishnavyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Hari.
Bhakti Marg
His
Swami
Holiness
ki
Bhakti
jai.
Maharaj Swami ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Prabhupada.
Haribo, Haribo.
Ki jai.
Yeah.